Hey Bjorn, how's it going? Okay, so this looks a lot better. Like the honestly, the first time I looked at this, like one of my favorite things is when I look at someone's throw that they send me for review, and I think, oh crap, I don't see anything wrong with this. What do I do? And I feel like I'm a bad coach because I don't know. But it's just like that just means that you're doing a good job and you're getting very close to doing everything correctly. And then I have to like step into level 2 mode and go, okay, I'm going to get nitpicky. I'm going to look very closely at everything and see if I can find something that's wrong. And I did, so I'm sorry, but you still have something to work on. But it's like, I want to point out that you've made a lot of progress. This looks a lot better because when I have to look, I have to like slow it down and go frame by frame to see something that looks not efficient. Then that's a really good sign. So your movement on the whole here looks really good. You're getting into a good counterbalance right there. Let's see if I can pause it. That's really good. How your arm is like about 90 degrees teed up with your lean here. That's great. Your X step looks pretty controlled. Oh, that's after your X. That's a nice small controlled X step. The off arm is punching down at the right time. The disc arm is pulling through at the right time. Everything looks pretty good. So then when I went back and looked at it again, so I looked at it like 3 times, I was like, okay, it looks really good. There's like nothing glaringly wrong. But then the first thing that I saw is here. See how that foot slips? And then here, let me grab my draw tool. Oh, okay, here's the thing. So I'm just gonna like draw the angle you're not quite in frame there. Nope. Move you up a little bit so you can see your foot. So your rear foot sets down like on that angle. And then as we go forward, you see the toe move. So your toe slips to like here. And then the whole foot starts to slip. So the whole foot is sliding that way to the right. Play that all again. So your foot sets down. Your toe slips first. So the foot sets down there. Toe moves here, 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 and then the whole foot starts to slide. And that foot is sliding. That's not necessarily a problem, but it means you're losing meaningful ground contact with this foot. And you're doing that before this heel is down. So that means your rear hip is pushing forward. Your rear hip is pushing that way because the foot is pushing the ground this way. So your motion, and that's the right idea. The motion in your hips is correct, but you want that to happen not because you're pushing off of the ground with this foot, but because this foot, this heel specifically, is pushing up the leg and pushing your front hip that way. So when the front hip goes to the right, the rear hip should go to the left. And the rear hip coming forward is kind of what makes the foot go that way. And the leg can also help, like the hamstring and the glute can contract to push the hip forward. But you don't want the rear leg to go backwards because you're making the leg do that. You kind of want it to happen as a result of the hips. So all of that is to say that you're pushing off with your back foot more than I would want to see, and I would want to see more of the push come from your front foot. So let's see. So there's the foot slipping to the right, and what that means is that your back hip is more active than your front hip. And then you can't really see it in this view, but the angle of your front hip, your hips are too close to over your front foot. So, but the coordination, the balance looks really good. So that's kind of the hard part, and we've just got to tune up what the power source is. So I want more of the power to come from your front leg bracing and less of it to come from your back leg pushing off. So that's that part. While we're on this video real quick, so we had talked about wobble before. You were concerned about wobble. If that problem is solved, then don't worry about what I'm about to tell you. But if you are still dealing with wobble, this might be a factor. So here's the disc in yellow, and then your forearm is in blue, and then your upper arm is in also blue. So this is potentially problematic. What Not necessarily, right? We talked before last time about like some players throw with their arm all over the place, and it doesn't matter as long as everything gets back to the hit point, and the hit point is where you want it, and you have enough power and consistency. If you don't have enough of those things, then you might want to look at what I'm going to show you right here. Okay, so given those lines, what we would rather see is we would rather see your upper arm here, your lower arm exactly in line with that here, and then the disc for the most part also exactly in line with that. If you were trying to get fancy and throw a little bit flat from hyzer, you could do some of that with your wrist and your grip and have the disc more here. But basically you want everything in line. So what you have down here is not everything in line. That's kind of the opposite of everything in line. And the big problem is really that your elbow is below the disc, and that's like, it's not a problem if by the time you get to release everything is back in a straight line, upper arm, lower arm, and disc, then it's okay. But it doesn't look like that's what you do. I can't quite see it because the disc gets behind your body. But like, so this is one frame before release and your elbow is still off the plane of the disc. But then here your elbow does lift up. I can tell it has to go up because of where your hand is on the disc. So you might be getting back to where you would want to be, but I'm just not sure from this angle. So if you want to film a shot outside where I can see the disc after it leaves your hand, then I could, see that better. But you're the best judge of that ultimately. If you're happy with your release and your wobble, then don't worry about it. But that was one of the things you had mentioned before that you wanted to work on, was release and wobble. So the other thing here is, I know, because the disc disappears behind you, I know the disc is not going that direction, which I would hope it would. So the disc completely disappears. So I know the disc is probably going that direction, which means you're throwing to 12 o'clock. So if this is a clock face, right, this is 12 o'clock, this is 6 o'clock, I would want to see your arm be about there at release. So this is 10 o'clock, 10:30. And then the disc would go straight out from that point. So hopefully that makes sense. I know that's a lot of lines, but I can spend some time demoing that for you. So we'll talk about, I think we talked about that a little bit last time. Hit at 10, the rear foot slip thing is something we want to look at. Hip drift is an issue. So we can see the hip drift better in the other video, because then we can see the angle that your front leg's at. If I can get to it. There we go. Okay, so here Good X step again. I like that. But I don't like how the weight settles onto the heel in the X step. I think that's part of your slip issue. So there again, we see the foot pivot. So the foot sets down. I'll just grab the white of your shoe because that's what I can see. So you're pivoting on the heel. So if here there's 1, 2, 3, 4 frames of the foot pivoting. Oh, missed it. There's 4 frames of the foot pivoting before it 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it slips. So your foot moves a decent amount. You know, that's 15 degrees maybe. I don't know. Enough that it matters, right? So we want to make sure that stops. You want to keep the weight on that foot, on the ball of that foot. Make a note of that. So that the rear leg can help you drive into the brace in a way that makes sense, rather than losing its contact and then you're just going to dump onto the brace, however you're going to do it. So let's look at your front leg. So I'm going to say that your heel comes down, bam, in that frame. So it's down in that frame. It comes down in that frame. And we'll get rid of those lines. We'll put a mark on the inside of your knee. And we'll click back in the video, get back to that point. So this is frame 0 where your heel is down. And then we go forward 1 frame. Forward another frame. And then there's your release. So we'll call this your brace. So your knee moves 4 inches during your brace. We really want your knee to not move at all during your brace. So another way to say this is that your brace is still soft. It's still squishy. It's still moving. So the knee just moves forward the whole time. It's either moving forward or rotating forward. So by the time the knee stops moving, it stops moving right there. And then in the next frame, the toe is opening. So there's never a moment where your knee is still. And when you release, your front hip is over the inside of your foot. So the outside of your foot is here, the inside of your foot is there. That angle absolutely must be more like this in order to get any containment out of your brace, which is the biggest thing that will help your power and consistency and distance, is getting so basically how you're lined up here. This foot can't do anything to the ground to keep this hip from going forward more. So your brace doesn't have any containment. If your foot were out here and your leg was like this, then pushing on the ground with that foot would make this hip stop and not go forward anymore. So the way you throw, your hips kind of just go forward the whole time. And what we would really like to see is the toe hit the ground, the heel hit the ground in front of the toe, the knee straighten out and push into the hip to stop the hip and send the front hip towards the back. When the front hip goes back, equal and opposite reaction, the rear hip comes forward, the rear leg goes backward, and then the hips switch places really fast. And that's what makes torque. So your hips aren't switching places in the same place. They're switching places as they move forward, basically. So let me flip the camera around and I'll demo some of that stuff for you. Okay. So the hit it 10 thing is really hard. This is the hardest thing to teach online because it's really just feel. Like it's It's easier if I'm there with you. But the best way I have to explain it is if I have a stick and I want to hit something, like if I want to hit this pole, I'm not going to line up to it, or I'm not going to turn sideways to it and go like this, right? I'm not going to hit, if I'm going to hit the camera, sorry, my phone's going off. If I'm going to hit the camera, I'm not going to hit it like this. I'm not going to hit it right here. I'm going to move my body that way, and I'm going to hit this way, like on kind of a 45-degree angle. So the same thing happens with the disc. I really don't want to throw the disc to you here. I want it to come out of my hand here because it's ripping out and it's going to break contact with my fingers right here. And because it's on an arc, it'll be going on a tangent to that arc. So if I had like a baseball on a string and I was spinning around, if I let go of it right here, it's going to go 90 degrees that way. So it's the same idea with a disc. Like, it's really intuitive for us to want to throw to the thing we're throwing to, but when you really get a high level counterweight and brace working, you're snapping everything right here. So if I were to do that at the camera, the disc would go that way. So it's like almost 45 degrees off. So that's really hard to understand. But the best way I have to figure it out is get a golf club or something similar and go to the park and throw it. Because you'll throw it, and if you release here, it's going to go 45 degrees that way. So you really have to get a feel for like your hit point is really right here. Boom. And that's where you want everything to pull to tight. Not that you're doing anything or sending anything that way. You just want it to boom out of your hand at that point. So that's that thing. Still working on how to teach that online. It's just hard. The other thing is hip drift. So you really don't want your hips to be here over your front foot. When you're doing a one leg drill, your hip is over your front foot. But that's a stand-in for bracing really well, where your foot is actually out here. Boom. And you get this hip to move backwards. So if I'm throwing towards the camera, you should see my back pockets. And then when I brace, boom, you should see my front pockets. And that's because this hip is moving that way because of my leg straightening up. So if I braced with no offset, it wouldn't work. I would just go up. I have to have this offset so that this foot pushing into the ground moves this hip that way. That's the whole thing that makes our brace work. So you can't do that in the way you're throwing currently because your hip gets too far on top of your brace. So all you can do from here is spin forward. And you are getting some rear leg counterweight, so that limits it a little bit, but your front leg can't push yet in a way that it pushes and stops your front hip and adds power to your throw. So it's that motion there where like I have my foot in front, both of my knees are bent, and when I straighten this knee, it moves my hip backwards and spins my hips around. That's the motion we want. It's very hard to get to. So the one leg drills, the whole progression of one leg drills is what helps with that. But the other thing to work on is your rear foot slip. So you made a good change of making your X step smaller and not turning everything so much backwards on your X step. So that's good. Keep moving that change in that direction of ideally we would want nothing to move. So I'm not turning backwards at all. I'm keeping everything here. And then as this foot comes forward, then I turn backwards. So you're doing good on that. But the next thing to add is keep this foot here and stay up on the ball of the foot. So don't let the heel come down. Because when the heel comes down, that's you pivot on the heel. So your toe slides, which means your leg is not in an athletic position because your heel can't push. If it does, you're just pushing, you're just straightening your knee, and then you're making your rear hip go up. And we actually want your rear hip to go down under the front. So you can't do that with the way you have your leg set up currently. So the change is stay up on the ball of this foot. Stay up on the ball. And then as you come towards your brace, let your knee dip in. That will fix everything for the most part, because then you'll keep pressure on this foot instead of the pressure going away and your toe slipping behind you. You'll keep the pressure, drive in with the knee, and then you'll get to this position. And then when you load the front and unload the front, your brace will work better. So that's the biggest piece of advice I can give you on that. So the way you're going to practice it is just go through it without even throwing, just trying to get your feet in the right position. And then up on the ball of the foot and stay on the ball of the foot and let the knee dip inward. And then just do the rest of the throw the way that you're used to, and we'll see what happens with your front leg. But I think that will help your motion into your brace. And then the other really hard part is getting the brace thing to actually work so your hips stay behind. And the best way to do that is to do the one leg drills. Just get used to the power comes from dropping this hip down and really feel that to where you can feel the power there, which a lot of it has to do with your arm being on the plane and not getting your elbow dipped below, because that'll screw up your power. So start there, spend some time with that, and then you can move into doing a weight shift where now I have a little bit of that angle in my leg, and I'm basically leaving that leg posted there, and I'm going to shift my weight back and then shift my weight forward and let my rear leg internally rotate, but I'm leaving my leg here. I don't go and throw from on top. So I'm throwing from behind. And then you can do a one step and keep that angle in the front foot. And then you can do a full walk up. And that's where it'll start to actually look right and not look weird like how I'm demoing it. But that's where I would start. So change the swing plane just like how we talked about before, where everything's upper arm, forearm, and disc are all on the same plane the whole time. So this is where I want you to be able to throw, at least with everything in a simple plane. What you do is you let your elbow dip a little bit, and then your elbow has to switch places with the disc. That's fine if you're happy with your power and your angle control and your wobble. If not, work on getting everything lined up again. So swing plane stuff, work on the hit at 10. Throw a golf club for that one, and then change the way your X step touches the ground, so just on the ball, and let the knee dip in. And then you can spend some time on the one leg drills looking at the hip drift thing if you want to as well. So there's lots of stuff to change, but you've figured out the basic movement in your body overall, and now it's really drilling down and making sure that the core mechanics are correct. So good work so far. Keep it up, and we'll see you next time.